People are coming in.
Good. I want to see who they are.
Yes.
No, some people I know are going to be here, so I'm looking for them.
Yeah.
People I don't know.
Or familiar Zoom names. Where are they? Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'm here, but I can't get my name off the thing.
That is okay. Hypothetically, we don't. Well, Allie, do you like to see faces? Probably, don't you?
If people don't mind their faces, I love seeing faces because then it makes me feel like I'm really teaching. But if you don't want your face on there, then you can totally.
Oh, I see. Here. Oh, there we go. There we go. I'm here.
You're here. Adjust it a little bit just so because it's almost cutting off my head. Let's pull it a little bit back. There you go. Perfect. Let's see what you want to do first. Yeah. Oh, it's almost 6.
I know we have one more minute and we'll wait for people to join in that last minute and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah. Well, and some people, I suppose they can still have the class, but if they can't make it tonight, they can watch the.
Absolutely. Yes. Great point. The class is being recorded right now and will be posted to our YouTube probably sometime tomorrow. So if you miss something in the middle of the class, there's always YouTube to go back to. So
yeah,
it's fun to rewatch them too. These are like really engaging classes. So all right, well, it is 6 p.m. so we can go ahead and get started. I'll just introduce myself really quickly. My name is Libby. I am the social media and events coordinator at Oriana. We're so happy to have everyone in our virtual kitchen. I'm going to drop a link to the recipes that Allie is working from today in case anyone, for whatever reason, doesn't have them. So that'll be in the chat right now. And then as I mentioned, yes, this will be recorded and posted to YouTube later. And this is a like collaborative space. Even though we're online, we encourage anyone to ask questions either in the chat or unmute yourself, and either Allie or I will uplift that to the class, and so we'll get your questions answered. But I think that is everything. Is there? Am I missing anything, Allie?
I don't think so. No.
Great. Well, we're so excited to have Allie calling in from Vermont, which is always such a treat. Wow. And so, yeah, I think we're ready to get started.
All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who are here and for those of you who are not here and are going to be watching this at a later time. I'm Allie Lopez, and for those who don't know, I used to work at the co-op in Vermont at Oriana. And I taught lots and lots of classes and write for the newsletter. And I actually still write for the newsletter. But I've since moved to Vermont about a year ago. And Oriana still loves me to teach. So I get to teach from my new kitchen at home instead of in the new fabulous kitchen that Oriana just opened, actually, which when I come back to visit, I am excited to see. But I'm excited that you guys are interested in this class. Maybe some of you are familiar with these blue zones, and maybe some of you aren't familiar with the blue zones, but I did want to grab my cookbook to show you. This is what we're working out of, the Blue Zones kitchen. This came out, I want to say a year or so ago, or maybe even a couple of years ago. And this book has the recipes, the very traditional recipes from the 5 regions of the Blue Zones. And for anybody who doesn't know what the Blue Zones are the regions in the world where a large percentage of the population lives to 100 or above. So the largest percentage of centenarians. And so the Blue Zones kind of looks at not just their diet, but it looks at a lot of other lifestyle factors. And I really encourage you to kind of research the Blue Zones and check out the Blue Zones book, the original Blue Zones book. They also have an Instagram and a whole bunch of stuff. For today, we're just going to be looking at the food piece of it. But there's a whole lot that goes into it. But they also just came out with another cookbook called the Blue Zones American Kitchen, which I'm excited to see. I haven't seen it yet. And it Americanizes or kind of has more familiar ingredients and familiar recipes in their newest cookbook. This one is wonderful, but I'm excited to also see the other one. So what I decided to do for this class, which is ambitious, but I'm pretty ambitious, is I really wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of all 5 regions. So I'm going to cook one dish from each region. I gave you the recipes for all of the 5 dishes, and then you can experiment. The one exception is the Okinawa, Japan one. I'm going to cook the base, but I'm not going to cook the other part of the recipe. So that you'll have to play with. So we're going to kind of bounce around because I want to start things since we only have an hour. I want to get things going. Not that you'll actually be able to taste it at the end, but at least you'll be able to see what things look like. So I'm going to get started with, what am I doing first? Sardinia, Italy. So we are going to work with a minestrone, and most people are familiar with a minestrone. The Sardinian recipe that I pulled from the book is really interesting. It does not have pasta in it, which I thought was interesting because we tend in America, and certainly in parts of Italy, we just tend to think of minestrone as beans and pasta, or at least I do, in the traditional way. So I'm going to get started and get my base going. So I'm starting with onions and garlic, because that's what I always start all of my soups with. And I'm going to get that going in some olive oil. Obviously, we're working with Italy, so we know there's going to be a good amount of olive oil in there. So let me just get my pan going. And some olive oil. All right, so I've got my onion. I'm going to toss it in. Okay, and then I've got some celery and some carrots, which is always a good start for a soup base. Almost any soup that I make, I will start with onions, celery, and carrots. Just adds a nice depth of flavor. And if you don't have vegetable stock and you're just working with water, which is what we're going to do today, you can make this soup either way. Starting with your celery and your carrots and your onions and your garlic is just going to give you that depth that if you didn't have a stock would sort of imitate the stock. And if you're using a stock, you'll get an even deeper flavor. So I'm just going to go ahead and chop some celery. And feel free, like Libby said, if you have questions, you can type them in the box. Or, there's not a ton. I don't think people will be talking over each other. So feel free to ask them if you don't feel like typing them. And I can answer as I go. So we're just cutting up some carrots, some celery, some onions, and some garlic. One of the features of the Blue Zone, the diet, is that one of the things that they all have in common, because what the book looks at is not just what they're eating, but the concept of the Blue Zones is what's the common denominator? What's the similarities between the different regions? So one of the differences, one of the similarities is that they all eat a plant,
Oh, I have my headphones on.
a plant-based diet. So not necessarily a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, but a plant-based diet. So the diet's based around plants. So 90% of their diet is plants, and plants is not just vegetables. Plants are grains, plants are seeds and nuts, anything pretty much that grows is a plant. So in this minestrone, I find it really interesting that there's not pasta, which I absolutely love pasta, and there's nothing wrong with pasta. But pasta is not a whole food. It's not a whole grain. And in this recipe, what they use barley, which I find very interesting because that is a whole grain. But yet it adds the carb that you would normally have with the pasta. So again, the similarities between the different countries and the different regions, I'm just cutting up some garlic now, is that they're very plant heavy. Okay, hands sizzling away now. Let's just pull up the recipe here.
So we have
So
a question from,
yes, go ahead.
yeah, we have a question from Jill, asking if there are other whole grains you could use in this recipe.
Oh, absolutely. If, for example, if you were gluten-free and you didn't want to use barley, you could add quinoa. I might add it later in the recipe because it doesn't take as long to cook. If you didn't mind the gluten or if you were able to eat gluten, I would think farro would be delicious in this because farro has that real nutty flavor. You could also use buckwheat, which would be gluten-free, and you could even use rice. There's no reason why you couldn't add rice to it. Again, you might have to just adjust the cooking time because the rice might take a little bit longer than the barley. So really mixing it up with any grains in there. I don't see a grain that wouldn't be nice. And I decided for this, maybe it's not traditional. The recipe does call for potatoes, but I decided I wanted to throw sweet potatoes in there. Nothing against white potatoes. I love white potatoes, but I just kind of felt like I wanted to throw a sweet potato in there. I don't know if that's traditional for Sardinia. I don't think that's a huge sweet potato growing region. I don't know. But I decided I wanted to throw sweet potato in there. So I'm going to throw some sweet potato. So I've got all my veggies cooking. I think I've got them all cooking. Okay. Yes. So then I'm going to let them soften a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my lentils, my barley, and garbanzo beans. So this dish is really, it's full of protein, it's full of vegetables, it's full of grains. It's so nourishing. And it's really I just love it because you've got everything in one. If you really wanted to up the nutrition in it, I would say, go ahead and throw some beautiful kale in there. I always throw greens in my soups. That's kind of a given with me. If I'm making a soup, there's going to be something green in there. We are going to add some parsley in there. So we are going to have some greens in there. But I'm going to let that go ahead and do its little thing for a while. And then I'm going to get the other soup going. Because we're doing two soups. One of them is more of a traditional soup, and the other one I would say is more of a broth. So let me just give these guys a stir. Gonna get a little more oil in there. And season with some salt and pepper. Always salt and pepper. Wish I had a little drone, camera that could come over to the stove and go over to the pot and show you the pot. Maybe the newest technology can do that. Okay, so let me just see that I've put everything that I'm supposed to put in there. I have, letting them soften. So the next one we're gonna do is, my little recipe, is from Okinawa, Japan. which is another one of the blue zones. And so what I'm going to do is a very, very basic, it's almost the base of any Japanese soup recipe that you want to start with. You can also just eat it on your own, is a dashi. And so what dashi is just a base broth. The base of it is kombu, which is seaweed. And there's a vegetarian one, and then there's a non-vegetarian one. If you were to make the traditional non-vegetarian, you would use a bonito flakes, which are fish flakes. So basically sort of like a fish stock, if you would. I'm going to do the vegetarian one today. And that one, it still has the kombu, but it has dried porcini mushrooms. And so that gives you that same umami, that same depth that you would get from fish, but without giving you the fish. And so this one is super simple. I just have my kombu, and if you've never worked with kombu before, it looks just like the seaweed that you find at the beach. And actually, I cook all of my dried beans. I put a little piece of kombu in my dried beans, and it adds a little bit of nutrition. And supposedly, it's a little bit easier digestion using the kombu in there. I've just always done it that way. And it does add a little flavor, a little salty flavor, which I kind of like as well. So if you do buy the kombu for the dashi, you can use it anytime you're going to cook dried beans. So it comes in pretty handy, and it lasts forever. So that's it. So we're going to take the kombu, and I'm going to take it out of the water, and then I'm going to add it into some fresh water on my stove. So I've just got my pot, and I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm going to just do a small batch. I'm going to do like about 4 cups of water. So it'll give me like a quart of dashi. And then what you can do with that is pretty much what you would do with a vegetable stock or a chicken stock, is you can use that as your base of your soup. So what I did in the recipes is I gave you a really nice red miso soup with spinach and tofu. So you can take this dashi after you make it, and then you can make the soup with that. And it's a super simple, you're basically just wilting the spinach and then adding some tofu. And you've got a delicious soup that you can have for breakfast, for dinner, for lunch. It's just a really, really nice, a nice dish. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my kombu, just put it into the water. And then get my porcinis.
We have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
Someone asked, is kombu raw, and can roasted seaweed be substituted?
You know, I don't think that roasted seaweed would be good because it would dissolve. Kombu's pretty sturdy because it's basically just seaweed that's been dried. And you can boil it for a bit before it completely dissolves. But if you were to take like toasted nori, like what you make, what you would make sushi with, I think that would dissolve right away. And I don't think you get any flavor out of it. That's just my guess on the way it behaves. Kombu's really, if you take a piece before it's soaked, it really is like fairly thick. It bends, it doesn't crumble, and it smells like the ocean. I love it.
That's awesome.
If you're ever kind of like homesick for the ocean, I grew up on the ocean, so sometimes I get homesick for the ocean. But if you ever just open up the kombu and just smell it, and it's just delightful, in my opinion.
And then someone also asked, if you're using the bonito flakes, is there a recommended brand?
I think this Emerald Cove, which I know they carried Oriana, and my co-op carried it. The bonito flakes, that they were all on the same display rack. It's probably the same name, but I would say if Oriana carries this brand, they would probably carry the similar bonito flakes. I don't know the brand, but you want to make sure you're buying a good quality brand,
Right.
because again, you're not wanting yucky fish.
Exactly.
If you're going to be using fish, you want to be using a good brand. So I'm just gonna wait until this comes to a boil. Actually, my kombu. And then I will throw in the porcinis, and then you just bring it to a simmer and simmer it for 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll drain everything out. And then I have my dashi. So pretty simple. So I think by now I can probably go ahead. My onions and carrots and celery are probably softened enough for me to add the rest of my ingredients into the pot. So I'm going to go ahead and add my water. So like I said, try to bring my head in here. I'm using water instead of stock for the soup. So I'm going to got my water going. And then I've got some diced tomatoes. Got garbanzo beans. I've got lentils, and you can use any lentils you want. I probably wouldn't use red lentils because those fall apart completely. But you could use brown, green, black lentils, doesn't matter. And I'm going to put those lentils in. And my barley. Okay, make sure I got everything.
Then we
So-
have one more kombu question. Someone is asking why you throw out the water the kombu was soaked in. And also, I guess just a curious for me follow-up question is, can you use anything, or can you use that water after it's been soaked in?
That's a good question. I don't know why. I mean, I'm following the recipe. It's not a recipe I've written. The only thing I can think of is similar to when you soak beans. You tend to not use that water, although I've heard both ways. Some people do soak the beans in that water and then use it. I don't think the seaweed is treated with anything that you should be throwing away. I would certainly say you could use it to water your plants. You don't have to throw it away. So I always use everything when I'm cleaning stuff. If I'm washing a big bowl of leeks and there's all dirt at the bottom, I will use that to water my plants. So I'll try to reuse as much of the water as I can. But honestly, I don't know. I don't know if there's a reason why that you soak it. But when I get off
That's a great suggestion.
when I get off the class,
Yeah.
I'll look it up and see why do I have to do that? So thanks for the question. All right, so make sure I've got my burners. When I got my burners behind me, I have to make sure I have them set right so things don't go awry when I'm not standing by the stove. All right, a little more water in my pot. I'm going to bring it up to a boil. Put the lid on it here. And my dashi water is boiling, so I'm going to take some of my dried porcinis and I'm going to add them to the water and then just let it simmer. All righty. All right, let's move on to dessert. If I want to get something in the oven, we have to start on dessert before we're going to do our little salads. So I am going to go ahead, and we are now in Loma Linda, California. So the United States gets represented with one of the Blue Zones regions. And does anybody know why Loma Linda, California was chosen as one of the Blue Zones? Okay, I'll tell you. Actually, it's Loma Linda has the largest percentage of Seventh-day Adventists. a community of Seventh-day Adventists that live there, and they are rather strict vegetarians. And so that's sort of credited with why they live the longest. I don't know if that's, the only thing. Again, diet is one part of the blue zones. There's a lot of other things, which hopefully, if I get all the food going, we can chat a little about that, because that's the part I really find fascinating, is not just the food. It's all of the other parts that make the blue zones really cool. So we're going to go ahead and make oatmeal breakfast cookies from the Loma Linda, which I thought was a super cool, very easy recipe. And I also thought it's dessert, so that's kind of fun. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to mash some bananas. And there's very few ingredients in this recipe. It's got bananas, oats, chocolate chips, and applesauce. And, you want to get pretty ripe bananas so they mash really nicely. And this recipe calls for quick oats because we're making cookies and we want them to absorb the liquid pretty quickly also. I tend to never buy quick oats because they're the ones that tend to be processed a little more. So when I'm making oatmeal, I don't really like to eat quick oats. I prefer to eat something with a little more heft to it. But you can buy them for the cookies, or you can just take the oats that you normally buy and give them a blitz in your food processor or your blender. Just blitz them a little bit, and then they'll break them up so they'll be soft enough, and then they'll blend right into the cookies. So that's a super easy way. If you don't want to have to buy a whole nother type of oats, if you buy regular rolled oats. All right, so I've got my banana mashed up. Okay, and then I'm gonna add my oats. Using my hands here to kind of mush it, because it's fun. And then I am lucky enough to have a friend that made me some homemade applesauce. So I am going to use some of her, my apron is doing little weird things. I'm going to use some of her homemade applesauce in this. But any applesauce is fine. You don't have to use homemade. Okay. And a little measuring cup. Not used to measuring things. Applesauce. Actually, maybe I'll put my sous chef to work. My boyfriend's over here kind of watching, but maybe I will have him put him to work rolling some of these cookies out so I can move along to the next thing. But we don't want to forget chocolate chips. We're going to go ahead. You don't have to measure chocolate chips. You should never measure chocolate chips except with your eyes and say, yep, that's enough chocolate chips. And then say, nope, that's not enough chocolate chips. All right. So this is our little cookie batter. Just gonna take a peek. Okay. That's at my soup. See, and it's boiling nicely. So I'm gonna just turn it down. Same with the Dashi, because I just want to simmer it. Simmer and simmer. Go. All right, so for the cookies, I'll just do a couple of them and then I'm gonna pass them along to my assistant over there and he will do the rest of them so we can get them in the oven. So I'm just gonna take a tablespoon. It's not mixed as good as I'd like it. Give it another little stir. Okay, I'm just gonna take a little spoonful, make them into cookie shape. So you got this? My assistant says yes. So just make little cookies. Take them over here. He's shy. He doesn't want to be on camera. So we're going to put him in the corner. All right. I'm just going to rinse my hands. All righty.
Question about the sweetener on the cookie. I'm assuming this is correct, but could you substitute maple syrup instead of honey?
For for afterwards for the rolling. Yeah, I'm not going to actually do that today, but that's an option. You can roll them in honey and nuts. I don't know if you certainly could try it, but I don't know if the maple syrup would be sticky enough to coat if you were going to coat them in the nuts. So the maple syrup's not, the honey's not really the sweetener, it's more of an added. I'm just going to bake them off as the cookies without the coating on them. But you can certainly try it. You know, if anything, you're just going to get really sticky with maple syrup. And it you know,
fun.
Yeah, if it's sticky enough, it should work just fine. Okay. So, and I'm kind of doing them flat like cookies. If you wanted to roll them, I would say keep them as little balls, and that way you could roll them in the nuts. You could also, if you wanted to, and which I probably would like to try next time, is I would add the nuts in with the chocolate chips. And that way it's kind of like oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. So without any flour. So why not? Okay, so let me move this out of the way. Oh, good, nice. 6:30, we've got 2 things on deck. All right, which one should we do first? Let's do, both of these are very interesting, I think, and very different than the way we typically would eat something in this country. So the first one I'm going to do, they call it the ingenious garlic spread. And I tried looking up, you want to put them in the oven? Oh, you don't want to be, you don't want to be on camera. Okay. I'm going to put those in the oven and set the timer because I will forget. And just check out my soups here, front, rear. Okay, we're good. I tried to look up the pronunciation right before the class because I'm not sure of it. And then I realized I could call my aunt because she lived in Greece for many years and she would know, and she was married to a Greek and she would know the correct pronunciation. And it's either scordalia or scordalia. The way I think it is scordalia. If I'm butchering it and mispronouncing it, I'm sorry, or it could be scordalia. I don't know where the emphasis is on the word. Anyway, what it is it's the main, I guess the main flavor of it is the garlic. So it's very garlicky, but they call it ingenious because it can be made one of 2 ways. And the way that I've had it in the past, that my Greek uncle used to make it, was with mashed potatoes, leftover pureed potatoes. And they were cold and lots of olive oil, lots of garlic. And then you just dip bread in it, or you dip crackers, or you dip vegetables, and it's just this really, really garlicky dip. So if you don't like garlic, you're going to want to skip this one. But the recipe in the Blue Zones book, which the region is Ikarian, Greece, which I'm not familiar with where in Greece that is. They use leftover or sourdough bread, which is what a lot of the regions eat in terms of bread. So they take the bread and they just soak it in water. So they basically, so they're not wasting bread that's too old to eat. Although I do remember my uncle eating baguettes that were so hard and crunchy. I don't know how he didn't break his teeth on them, but that's how he loved them. So I'm going to just pour out a little bit of the water that didn't get absorbed into the bread. And so it's just, and you can use breadcrumbs if you want, but I just used one of my favorite sourdoughs. So I just used the sourdough bread. And then we're just going to take these, just grab my recipe. I'm going to take these, and you can put them in a food processor or a blender, whatever you have. And I have this adorable little food processor here that I'm going to use. And if you want to look up the mashed potato recipe for it, I'm sure you can find one as well. If you don't, or you could probably try it with gluten-free bread. Because they actually now have some really good gluten-free sourdoughs. So I'm going to take my garlic. And like I said, it's a lot of garlic. I think the recipe calls for, doesn't call for a lot of garlic in this one. I'm putting in more than it calls for because it should be very garlicky. Well, I shouldn't say that. It calls for 2 garlic cloves, but these are really tiny, the ones I have. So I'm using 4 or 5 garlic cloves. But I guess if you didn't really love garlic, then you could use 2 small garlic cloves. And the other main ingredient that is in this is going to be the olive oil. So that's going to be, because like I said, it's a very garlicky, oily dip, but it's really wonderfully flavored. The other thing about this is we're going to make it now, but it's probably going to taste better tomorrow, because as everything, all the flavors kind of soak into it, it's just going to taste better. All righty. So my processor here. Okay. And then you can garnish it however you'd like. I like to chop some olives on top just to give a little more saltiness. And then we're going to give it some salt as well. But I'm just going to take my olive oil and put a little bit of olive oil in with the bread and with the garlic. And make noise, sorry. It's not too bad. And it kind of looks like hummus, and that's kind of what you're going for, is you're pureeing it, so it's sort of like hummus. I'm going to give it a little taste and see. I'm sure I'm going to need a little salt. But it like I said, it's very simple. But again, what a lot of these cultures do is they don't waste things. If they have stale bread, there's an Italian soup that's based on stale bread, and it is one of the most delicious soups that you can get. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, because when I was in Italy, I had that, and it was just absolutely incredible. And they'll just take the stale bread, and that's the main part of the soup. Panzanella salad is another one. It's a bread salad. They take the bread and they put salad dressing and salad ingredients, and it's like a soggy crouton, but it's delicious if it's flavored. So the same thing with this. Not enough garlic for my taste, but it's got that flavor. Oh, it's got garlic. It does have garlic. I'm going to take that back. The other thing you want to add, in addition to maybe a little salt, is vinegar, because you want that acid. Anytime you want to balance flavors, you want, in addition to your salt, you want a little acid, because acid is the part that, like, when you taste something, your tongue kind of goes like, ooh, yeah. And there's a little bit of a finish. Salt, you'll just taste the salt. Acid will actually help bring out the flavor of the food. So I'm gonna do a little white wine vinegar, and the recipe calls for tarragon vinegar. If you can find it, it's not a very common vinegar, but you could also use a little fresh tarragon in there. It would probably be delicious. But I'm just gonna do a little spritz, and then I'm gonna put a little salt in there. You can put salt in it, or you can finish it with salt. I'm just gonna put a little bit of salt in there because then I'm gonna put the olives on top when I plate it. And that way, the olives will give it a saltiness as well. Okay, just a little burr, and so simple, but like really good. And like I said, as it sits, because right now I can tell that it's bread, but as it sits and a day or so, the bread is going to get softer and softer, and it's going to absorb more of the garlic. So again, if you don't like garlic, this one's going to be tough because it is raw garlic as well. So I'm going to put that in a little bowl so you can see how pretty it looks. Where did my little bowl go? Oh, there's the little bowl.
And I have a question, Allie. So 2 of the blue zones represented in the recipes today are like in the Mediterranean, Sardinia
Yes.
and Greece. Is there any overlap between the Mediterranean diet, or are these blue zones more distinctive in their regional cuisines?
No, it's very, very, if you're familiar with the Mediterranean diet, very familiar, because the Mediterranean diet, again, a large percentage of the food is vegetables and fruits, and fish plays a large part in it. So the Loma Linda, California is the only of the blue zones that's strictly vegetarian. All of the other zones do eat animal products. The majority, they eat more fish than any other animal products. Okinawa, Greece, again, on the water. So they're eating the fish because they live on the water. It makes sense for them to be eating the fish. So, but eating a lot less beef and chicken, but not eating none. And then Costa Rica as well. That's the other region that we're gonna go with. They're not in the Mediterranean, but again, they large variety of fruits and vegetables because they can grow them all year round. So that's also a benefit. So we've got our pretty little scordalia or scordalia. I don't know. I'm going to call my aunt when I'm done and find out if I completely ruined it. I'm gonna go from there. All right. Let me just check on my soups and my stock. I'm actually going to turn the dashi off because it only needs around 15 or 20 minutes. And I'm just going to let it sit in the water. And I mean, I can show it to you. It doesn't look much. You probably can't really see it. It just kind of looks like brown water because again, it's got the kombu and the mushrooms. But again, this isn't a full recipe. This is your base. So you're getting a nice base. So you can make any kind of a miso soup. Or if you're not feeling well, just sipping on this and maybe even putting in a little bit of like ramen noodles or a little bit of rice in there. I just think it would be so nourishing and so good.
Allie, how do you typically serve? Oh,
we had
a question.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to taste some of the barley, and that's how I'll know if it's getting closer to being done, because that's going to be the thing that's going to take the longest to cook is the barley and the lentils. And it's pretty close. I'm impressed.
We had a question in the chat about what you'd like to serve the scordalia with, like crudité.
Well, it's funny because when my uncle used to serve it, he would make the version with the mashed potatoes. So he always served it with bread. Carbs on carbs. I love it. I'm a runner, so I love my carbs. But I probably wouldn't serve the bread version with bread, although I might with some really interesting crackers Like if you wanted to serve it with like a seed cracker, you know, like the Mary's crackers, which are like seeds. But vegetables, I think would be really nice with it. Because again, it's kind of like a really, really rich garlicky dip. But there's no reason you couldn't serve it with bread. Because again, it's sort of spreadable. We're going to put some chopped up olives on top. But I think it would be really nice with some veggies because it's, again, lots of oil in there. I think it also might be nice, not as a traditional, but it might make a really nice sauce over some roasted vegetables. If you just kind of put that on the sauce, put that on the vegetables, and then maybe even put them back in the oven for a minute, because it's kind of like breadcrumbs, but they've developed a little more flavor. I'm literally just creating this recipe as I'm talking to you because I'm like, oh, that sounds like that might be really good. I'm sure that's not what they do in Greece, but I think that would be really an interesting way to use it. The fact that it's, again, just bread and garlic. I think it would be really good on some roasted vegetables. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do with it. And I'll report back. Because I'm just like, oh,
curious.
I really like that idea. I think that would be really good. Some roasted carrots, and then just drizzle that on there, and then put it back in the oven. Let it get a little bit brown. I like it. Okay. So now we're going to move on to our final, which is our hearts of palm ceviche. So ceviche typically is made with fish, and it's raw fish that technically is cooked because of the acid that it sits in. So typically it's either scallops or shrimp or crab, and there's lime juice or lemon juice, and it sits in there and it changes the texture and the proteins in the fish. So it's no longer technically raw anymore. So even though it's not cooked with heat, it's cooked with acid. I think there's a debate on what constitutes cooking. Some people say if there's no heat, it's not cooked. It's raw, but it does change the scientific part of fish in that it's not considered raw anymore. But that doesn't matter because we're making it with hearts of palm. And I don't know if anybody's ever had hearts of palm, but they're a really interesting vegetable. A lot of times you'll have seen them on, I'm just trying to pull one out so you can see what they look like if you haven't seen it. When you get them in the container, I'm trying to pull one out without it coming apart. So a lot of times you'll see them on like the old style salad bars. They'll just be little discs. And they look like nothing. But they have a really, really interesting flavor. I've also used these. I was really excited about this recipe because I've used these when I make vegan crab cakes because they have the same texture as crab meat, but yet they're not crab. And they also have this scent about them that, again, reminds me of the ocean. They don't smell fishy, but they have this really interesting scent to them. So when I saw that the ceviche recipe, they're basically using these as the fish. So we are gonna go ahead and take these and make our ceviche. My timer just went off my cookies. So I just want to check them and see if we need a little more time. Oh my goodness, they look like cookies. All right, we're gonna give them a little more time though. Very exciting. 5. And our soup is good. Dashi's good. Everybody's happy over there. Okay. So we need our hearts of palm. And these are pretty easy to find everywhere now. And again, when you cut into them, they have like this little core in the middle. They're really interesting. I just wonder what the plant actually looks like that these come from. And again, I'm sure in Costa Rica, they're everywhere. Okay, I'm going to take another one of these. And they're very soft. They kind of look like they would be almost like a carrot, but they're very soft and they just chop up really nicely. Okay, let me get my little bowl here for my mixing. Check my time. Oh, can't check my time when my timer's going. Okay, get my bowl. Okay, and then we need a little bit of onion for this. Okay. Just a little bit of onion. I'm just going to make a smaller amount than the recipe calls for, just so we could sort of move along. And okay, so a little bit of onion in the bowl. And then we have our fish. Hearts of palm. I'm gonna do one more of these guys. And then the recipe called for, I took a little bit of license here. The recipe called for 2 small sweet red peppers and then a small habanero or jalapeno. So I couldn't find really small red peppers, and the jalapenos were huge today. So I was like, let me see. So I picked up these banana peppers, which kind of, for me, gets both of those. Both of those, you get the sweetness of the red pepper, but you also have the heat of the jalapeno or the habanero, because banana peppers are not like killer hot, but they also have just this really nice sweetness to them. So I'm going to add some of the banana peppers in there. So I'm just going to chop them up a little bit. They also have some of the nice acidity because they're pickled. So they already have some of that really nice acidity that we're going to add with some more lime juice that we're going to add in there. Okay, take my lime. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix my ingredients. And then grab a little fork here. Squeeze some lime juice on them. And we're not really going to cook the hearts of palm because they're not raw like fish. But again, we want to let them sit a little bit so we'll get a little more flavor out of it. And then my favorite, and recipe does not call for enough, it calls for a tablespoon of cilantro. I'm sorry, you don't use a tablespoon of cilantro. And yes, if you don't like cilantro, you don't have to use cilantro for this recipe. I know there are some people who cilantro just does not taste good to them. My mom is one of them. She tastes like soap, and apparently that's a genetic thing. So if you do not like cilantro, I would suggest though that you do use some kind of cookies, some type of a fresh herb, because you really want that freshness. So parsley would be fine. Not sure about basil, but I think parsley would be fine. I'm so excited to eat this. This just feels like shouldn't be eating something this like fresh and light when it's like January. And well, although it was 40 degrees here today, I don't know what it was in Traverse City, but it feels weird that it's 40 degrees in January. So I'm going to go ahead, and isn't it? It's just so pretty and it just looks so fresh. And I know it's not going to be ready for me to taste right now, but I just, oh, and salt. Always always salt. Okay. I just want to give it a taste to see if I need a little more acid, if I need a little more salt. And then I'll put some fresh pepper on as well. Okay. Make sure I get a little bit of everything. Wow, that's really good. That's really good. I mean, if you've ever had ceviche, it tastes very similar. It has that same sort of texture. But again, it doesn't taste like fish. But ooh, I love this. Really good. Yeah, so this you could serve with tortilla chips or crackers, or if you want to be real traditional, you could do plantain chips, because that would be very Costa Rican. Yeah, so that's your ceviche, hearts of palm ceviche. But I do want to add a little pepper. And taking the cookies out. Yes. Timer went off while I was chatting. Oh my. Okay, look. The boyfriend did good. We've got cookies. I'm going to let them set for a minute, but they feel like cookies. And we'll have to taste one to make sure. But yeah. So easy. And again, if you have to be gluten-free, you could use gluten-free oats. I mean, really, it's a 4-ingredient cookie. And they call them breakfast cookies because you can grab a couple, have them for breakfast. And yeah, the chocolate, maybe the chocolate's not the best thing to have for breakfast. But a little chocolate, dark chocolate is actually really good for you. I don't know anything about the Blue Zones specifically endorsing chocolate, but I endorse dark chocolate. And like I said, if you didn't want to put the chocolate chips in, sad, but you could put nuts, you could put cranberries, you could put whatever you wanted in there instead of the chocolate chips. But I think just the oats, the bananas, and the applesauce really kind of just hold the cookies together. And again, I think it's important that you use either use quick oats or grind your oats a little finer, because if you use traditional oats, I don't think the cookies will hold as well, because you almost need to make up flour out of your oats. Let me see. Look at that. 5 minutes left. And here is our, I can't turn it enough. Oh, wait, let me see. Can I turn the camera to see the soup? A little bit. Well, it looks like soup, right? All right. I just want to give it a little taste. Really yummy. And like I said, super flavorful, full of so much nutrition. You could eat this all week for lunch, or you could have it for dinner. If you want to grate a little Parmesan on it, you can. I'm going to put some fresh parsley. Like I said, I'm going to put a ton of fresh parsley in there because that will just brighten it up. And that's another tip. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I'm going to give it a splash of red wine vinegar because, like I said, acid, very important. So let me do that. You could use any vinegar. You could use white wine, red wine, doesn't matter. Apple cider vinegar, doesn't matter. It gives it that little bit of tang. But what I did want to do just before we go and take any more questions is just kind of give you the little Cliff Notes version of kind of what the Blue Zones have in common and some takeaways. So like I said, 90% plant-based, so lots of fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, whole grains, nuts and seeds. So snack on nuts. That's one of the things that they do in the Blue Zones. Handful of almonds, handful of walnuts. Besides the healthy fats that you're getting protein, and you're getting a whole food. So think of when you're eating foods, the whole food. What's a whole food? They do eat less eggs and dairy. They don't eat no eggs and dairy. They just eat less eggs and dairy. Again, less meat, less. So the diet is nice in the sense that it doesn't say you can't eat anything. It just says, these are the things that we eat a lot of. The other thing is a lot of variety. Switch up your vegetables, try new things, substitute. Like I said, you could substitute white beans instead of garbanzo beans. You can change up the lentils in this. You could use 2 types of beans. We talked about switching up the grain. You can do that. Daily dose of beans. This is my, I preach this everywhere. I preach this in all my classes. I try to eat beans at least once a day. And that was also one of the similarities in all of the cultures. They relied on beans for a large percentage of their diet, whether it be soybeans in tofu, or whether it be white beans, black beans, kidney beans, doesn't matter. Beans in any format. Try to eat a half a cup of beans a day. I swear it's not that difficult. If you have a salad for lunch, throw a half a cup of beans on your salad. If you're making a soup, throw beans in your soup. Beans. I'm just going to keep saying that. Sourdough bread or 100% whole wheat or whole grain breads. They all seem to have. And they mostly drink water, coffee, tea, and wine. None of them are drinking, they're not really drinking soda and juice and all those things that we tend to drink. So those are the similarities. But one of the things that I really got from the Blue Zones is that it's not just about what you eat, it's your whole lifestyle. It's who you eat with, it's how you think about the food you're eating. It's your community in general. And Oriana is a great community space and a great community of people. I used to work in the store and I know so many of the shoppers, and it is a great community. The other part of the Blue Zones, which I think is not given enough attention, is not necessarily exercise for the point of exercise, but they move in their daily life. So movement is just a part of life. So they don't have to go out for their half-hour run, because they're walking more, they're moving more, they're going up and down. And it helps them live longer, apparently. So those are my quick takeaways, very quick. But I really encourage you to, the Blues, he has so many books out now. Dan Buettner is the guy that's started investigating the Blue Zones. And it's really fascinating. And you can take away so much just to help your life feel more full. I guess that's what I take away from it. So any more questions?
Yes, any questions? Getting some love in the chat. Well, if there are no further questions, we can head out. But before that, I'm going to send a link to the Eventbrite. If you love this class from Chef Ali, we have 2 more coming up in the coming months. So sign up for them if you would like. But thank you so much, Chef Ali. This was so inspiring, and I think you touched on a lot of the great points of not only diet, but lifestyle and community and all these things that contribute to a healthy life. Yes, we are all set with the class now, and we'll send a link out to the recording after or probably sometime tomorrow, in addition to a post-class survey. So if you want to take that, we're looking to constantly improve our programming here. But thank you all, everyone, for joining us this evening, and happy cooking at your homes.
Yeah. And feel free. I'm always available. If anybody wants to reach out, you can email me. You can message me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm completely accessible. If you had any questions that came up after the class, feel free, or send them to Libby and she can send them to me, however. But it's great seeing you, the faces I see and the names that I recognize. And yeah, I hope you come to my next 2 classes because they're going to be really fun too.
They will.
A little more indulgent. See ya.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.